Hi and welcome to today's episode in which I use silken tofu to make some gnocchi. Again, I did this video 2 weeks ago, transferred the files, everything was looking fine, the audio was perfect. Went to transfer the files from my external hard drive onto my editing machine. Where's the folder? As I sat at my desk, I thought, did I definitely copy the files? So I checked the cameras, the memory cards were empty. Then I looked on my laptop and the folder appears in my Explorer, but nowhere can I find these files. I sat at the desk and cried for a little bit and then thought, right, well, I'll just have to make it again, won't I? It's not the worst thing in the world because it was a great dish and I enjoyed eating it. So, you know, silver linings and all that. I'm going to do a couple of things differently as well, as a consequence of what I found the last time. I'm going to make some gnocchi dough and I'm going to use silken tofu. I saw a YouTube short from Hallie Burns and she made dough out of tofu. She used the stuff that comes in packets that you store in the fridge. I didn't have any of that, so I thought, oh, I'll try it with silken tofu and see what happens. I'll link to her original video down in the description if you want to see that. With her dough, she made gnocchi and then she made some flatbreads and also some little kind of air fried puff type things. I'm just going to make the gnocchi and also show you how to make a broad bean and mint sauce. We'll get the sauce on now because then that can slowly be warming through and infusing. I've soaked 20 grams of dried onion pieces in some vermouth. There's about half a cup of the dried pieces. If you haven't got the dried, don't worry. Just use a small white onion or half a large white onion and a splash of vermouth. Put this on the stove. I'm going to add about 300 grams of broad beans into that pan. You might also know these as fava beans. These are frozen ones, so put them in the microwave for a few minutes, just mixing them around every minute or so, just to get the chill off them. There's quite a thick skin on the beans, so I just stuck the tip of a knife in and then squeezed them out. That's probably the longest part of this dish, to be fair. Pour these in. Grated 4 cloves of garlic, fresh garlic. You can also use powder as well, that's fine. Put in some black pepper, probably a quarter teaspoon. Same as salt. And then a really good guzzle of olive oil. So it's probably going to be like 60, 70 mils at least, a few tablespoons. Give everything a stir. So I don't know if it technically is a sauce, it's kind of a warm garnish. The oil will soak up all of the flavours that we're putting in here. And then once that's heated through, I'll add in some vinegar just to give it a bit of bite. Now we'll move on to the dough itself. When I did that first batch, I just took a carton out of the cupboard and then added enough flour in until it formed a dough. Because silken tofu is so wet, I had to add a lot of flour into it and then I had to knead that and it became very chewy, which I don't mind. I don't mind a chewy gnocchi. It's kind of nice, but I thought this time what I'll do is try and refine it a little bit just so they're a bit lighter. This carton I had in the freezer, so I defrosted it and that splits the tofu and causes the liquid to come out. I've been draining that in the sink, just in a muslin cloth. So I'm just going to squeeze out a little bit more of it. I'm just going to gather up the edges of the cloth. Give it a squeeze. Now you can of course just use fridge type of tofu and then you have to mess around with it like this. But I wanted to try and do one which meant it was shelf stable. So I could just grab flour out the cupboard, tofu out the cupboard, and then I've got some nice protein rich gnocchi. Obviously freezing it scuppers that shelf stable idea. But I have got a couple of ideas of how to make it less chewy as well as doing this. Tip the tofu into a mixing bowl and just crumble it down a little bit. So it's still a little bit wet, but certainly drier than it was last time. I'll add a quarter teaspoon of salt into the dough. I've got a cup of flour here. Now what I've done for the grams, I've weighed the bag and then I'll tell you how much I've used. This is going to depend on how wet your tofu is, so don't necessarily do exactly the amount that I do. I'll do like 2/3 of that, I think. I'm going to use a dough hook, but you can use your hands as well, or a fork, that kind of thing. And really I want to try and avoid over kneading this, because that's how you end up with little bouncy balls of gnocchi. This is just plain flour that I'm using. I'm just going to have to go in with my hands because it does need a little bit of compressing. And what you want is a dough that comes together and doesn't stick. Yeah, come together well. So I just want to make sure it will hold its shape, which it will. So I'm going to leave that to the side. I used 80 grams of the flour. It's probably 2/3 of a cup. If you're doing cups, measure out a cup. If you're in the UK, measure out maybe 90 grams to 100 grams. What you're trying to do is minimize the amount of kneading, because kneading develops the gluten and it's the gluten that makes it chewy. So I would do maybe half the quantity, knead it a little bit until it comes together, and then if it's really sticky, still sticking to your hand and coating your hand, add a bit more in, like a tablespoon more. Maybe think of it, the first batch you do, that'll be a test drive you know, trial run kind of thing. And then you'll know what to look for the next time you make it. So don't be upset if your first batch are very tight and chewy. Don't worry, it's fine. So I'm going to roll this out. I'm suddenly worrying that it's just going to disintegrate when I put it in water. So I'm going to just do one little piece. I'll boil it and see what happens, just so I get an idea, because I don't want to do all of it and then it just fall apart. I'm going to bring a large pan of salty water to the boil, and then once it's started rolling boil, I'll drop the piece in. So I rolled out a little nugget, pop that in. It will float to the top once it's ready. Okay, well, it's not instantly disintegrating. That's a good sign. That's worked well. The smell's coming out the bean pan. Yes. Garlicky, oniony, beany, boozy. Yum. So I'm going to divide the dough roughly into 4. And I'll roll them into sausages. Just squidge it in a little bit and roll it into a long sausage. You don't want to do this too much because otherwise it'll start getting tough. So the gnocchi's all rolled out. I'm just going to cut that down into smaller pieces. And I've got a little bit of vegan butter, tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, something like that. That'll be for pan frying the gnocchi after I've boiled them. And start that warming up on a gentle heat. So I'm going to go that kind of size, I think. So this quantity is good for 1 person, maybe 2 if you don't eat as much as I do. Feel free to just upscale the recipe. Slide in the gnocchi. Just going to shimmy them around a little bit with a spider, just to make sure nothing sticks. Just keep jiggling them around. I'm just going to take these out of the bath and put them onto a plate with some paper towel because things aren't quite ready. Back to the sauce. I'm just going to check the flavour to see where it's at, what it needs. I'm going to put in about a tablespoon of chopped capers. That's going to give a nice tangy, bright saltiness. Start with half a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. And again, that's kind of lift it, give it some tanginess. Touch more apple cider. Just do it to taste, but it's about a teaspoon or so. Adding about a tablespoon of shredded fresh mint. That'll give it some nice summery, fresh, bright flavours. You don't want to put the mint in at the beginning because otherwise the flavour gets a bit muted. So kind of towards the end. Now back to pan frying the gnocchi. I'm going to tumble the gnocchi in. Paper towel probably wasn't the best thing to drain it on. That's fine. Extra fibre. And just toss them through the butter. Just looking to get a little bit of colour on those. The gnocchi's all pan fried and a little bit crisp and ready to be shoved in my mouth. I've got the gnocchi on there, then I scattered the bean mixture on top, whatever we're going to call that. I sprinkled on some chunks of Cathedral City vegan cheese. It's got a really nice tangy flavour. And I also found some of the pan grattata from the bacon mac and cheese pie. I'll stick the link in the description. So it gives a nice crunchy crumb coating. Spear up a bit of everything. That's perfect. Much lighter than the first time. They're plump, but they're not chewy. That's worked exactly as I hoped it would. If I can find a decent nutrition calculator online, I'll maybe see what the protein content is in that, because I imagine it's going to be quite high. Because I remember from the beans and legumes video, fava beans were at the top of the list of protein content for beans. Then you've got the protein in the tofu, protein in the flour. Yeah, should be a nice little way of nudging a bit more protein in there, if such things are a concern to you. The other idea I had for preventing that stodginess, if you don't want to go to the hassle of freezing the tofu first, this block of silken tofu is 349 grams. In that first video, I think I used around 300 grams of flour, which is around, I don't know, a cup and a half. I'll do a conversion, stick it on screen or something. So what you can maybe do is try 250 grams, just dump it straight in. Minimal amount of mixing just to get it cohesive, and then if it's needed, add a bit more flour in. I think the majority of the problem comes from trying to work the flour into the tofu because I didn't know how much it needed. Perhaps that's one way of trying it. The other way I thought of was maybe using cake flour because that's got less gluten than plain flour. So that could be another way of avoiding the chewiness. Again, if you're not bothered, if you like quite a dense chewy dumpling, then just roll it as much as you want. It's a very quick dish to pull together. I've been filming 55 minutes and there's lots of messing around when you're filming, having to repeat lines and move cameras, turn lights around, all that kind of thing. So I reckon half an hour, something like that, start to finish. So yeah, perfect for midweek. When I did the last batch, I had much more because obviously I'd added loads more flour and there was all of the liquid. So I boiled all of it that day, and then the following day I pan fried the leftovers, and that was another nice way of heating it back up again. Might do another video in the future trying different flours. So rice flour, maybe gluten-free bread flour, even maybe the teff, the flour that I used in the gluten-free seitan. That might be interesting. And maybe cornmeal, masa harina. Yeah, just try different things and seeing what happens. I think that mixture would work really nicely as a taco shell, like a taco dough. Yeah, and then you could do maybe shredded mushrooms inside, that kind of thing. I'd like to say a great big thank you to my supporters on Patreon. You're helping me keep everything going, keeping the fridge stocked, which is useful, especially at the moment. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to be alerted every time there's a new video. I do lots of plant-based wizardry and whole things delicious for a midweek meal. And while you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.